Just how big you define that box. And I came to GM through roundabout way through Hughes Aircraft. And when Hughes was purchased by GM, I brought 100 engineers to General Motors, got stuck in racing, and never left. And it's interesting because back then, a guy by the name of Don Runkle was one of my bosses. And he grabbed me by the ties, and remember we all wore ties back then. And he said, I'm sending you to racing to get inoculated, not to die from the disease. And it truly is, because once you get sucked into racing, it is very passionate, as Herb said. But I was responsible for all the tech transfer from Hughes Aircraft into General Motors, automotive operations. So yes, a lot of innovation. The Hans device, we started the GM racing program out of that. The safer barriers, a lot of technology. The air brakes you see on NASCARs that flip up, we took those off an F-16, put them onto the cars. Lots of technology transfer. So the point is, how do you define that box? Is what we're talking about today, and Herb said it very well as well today. Safety is probably one of the biggest attributes. And we want to do, and when Dennis and Tim and I were talking about this panel, we wanted to help you understand the technology transfer between 4- and 2-wheel motorsports. Because arguably, 2-wheel motorsports, motocross, supercross, MotoGP, some of the others, are, I like to say, 20 years behind 4-wheel motorsports. So a lot of knowledge in this room can be applied to 2-wheel sports, but you'll hear those calibrations from the experts. I'm going to show you 2 quick videos just to kind of dial you in. And this first one is actually just a real quick overview of the Motocross Sports Medicine and Science program that we have. Dr. Terry Trammell's on the board, Dr. John Bodner, Paul Ryman. Dr. Paul Ryman, he's here as well, is on our board. Great board, Dr. Amy McIntosh, and we'll be talking at the ICMS tomorrow. But lots of great things. This will dial you in real quickly of what we're trying to do in 2-wheel motorsports.
Everybody's looking for a little edge out here. There's no doubt about it. What's cool is they've found perhaps a new angle on safety. This is a cool new innovation that's actually coming from other forms of motorsport, starting to work its way into motocross. Let's get more on that.
The Motocross Sports Medicine and Science Foundation is basically a program we started, myself and Dr. Amy McIntosh from the Mayo Clinic, to improve the safety and the sustainability of motocross for our sport. This is the first motocross event data recorder. We've had these on the helmets thanks to Troy Lee and his riders. And within this unit are 3 accelerometers and 3 gyroscopes, so you get the X, Y, and Z axis, the pitch, the yaw, and the roll of the bike. The rider gets a pair of custom earpieces. These are 200+ G accelerometers in each ear. This is not a toy. This is medical research proven in IndyCar racing, F1, etc., applied to motocross. Now the same unit goes on the bike, so we can measure the rider biomechanical forces as well as what's happening with the bike. We're actually feeding this information to the Asterisk Mobile Medical Center because we want to triage the things that Doc, Bob, and Ryman do at the track. We want to give them the information. The most important thing about that is once you've had a head injury, when is it safe to return to riding? Yes, you have the red indicator go off, but you don't know the severity of it. This will tell you how severe that concussion was. And it's not just the concussion. Once you have the forces, or the accelerations from the EDR, we know the mass of the rider. Force is mass times acceleration. We can do all the calculations of the moments and the forces to start engineering better knee braces, better neck braces, and know what the body's going through thanks to this little device here. Again, no different than what's on an aircraft, what's in IndyCar, and what's in F1 right now.
That's pretty incredible stuff. This is what our sport needs. The bikes have gotten faster, the riders have gotten faster, so now I'm glad to see technology keeping up.
Yeah, that's the key, certainly in racing. The number one thing you want to see is safety first, and then great racing second. Cole Seeley and the folks there at the Lucas Oil Troy Lee Designs team helping to contribute to that. We are ready to go racing.
So that's just a quick overview, and I think some of those comments are right on because it is safety first because we'll talk later on in the industry growth segment about what's the perfect race? The chance to race the next one. So safety is a big part of that. And this last 30-second clip is an analogy from the NFL, and I think the point is you've got to know what you're doing, and in this case, the racing business, you've got to be proactive.
Next time on Frontline, get ready to change the way you see the game.
The brain is riddled with disease.
These players come down with dementia and then Alzheimer's, and then they're gone.
Frontline investigates what the NFL knew and when they knew it.
The level of denial was just profound.
The inside story.
You can't go against the NFL. They'll squash you.
Watch online or on air beginning October 8th.
Some real words of wisdom there because of what's happening in youth motorsports, and we will talk about that. And just since that came out, the decrease in youth football participation went down 10%. Now, can we afford that in the racing industry? Absolutely not. Can you imagine mom and dad saying, no, you're not going to get into that car, you're not going to get on that bike, you're not going to get in that cart, you're not going to go to skip barber school because we don't want you to get better? So think about the ramifications of that and being proactive. And thanks to Feld Motorsports, a sponsor of ICMS tomorrow, as well as getting on board proactively with youth, because arguably the Supercross and motocross gets to the kids when they're 2 to 4 years old, are racing Supercross when they're 5 years old. So anyway, take it away, Dennis. Dr. D.
And Doc, why is the two-wheel world so far behind the four-wheel?
Well, I do want to take a little bit of a kind of a hit against John on that one, because 20 years as far as how far we've from when we started, but actually, as I don't know if John wants to get my slides up, a couple quick things is we've started a concussion program 5 years ago before even the NFL was really getting in their feet in the hot water, and basically we have a state-of-the-art program we've been using for the last 4 to 5 years now, where riders have to be cleared by us. They have to go through an impact test as well as a whole neurophysiological testing and psychological testing to make sure that they're better. You take the impact test, see what your scores are. The hardest hurdle is obviously getting the riders to, say, yeah, I had a concussion. Luckily for us, it's easy to see for most of the guys, and us being there every day, and as Terry knows, you're right there in their face when they crash. You kind of get an idea they've been concussed. Some of the other things, if you want to go to the next slide, we'll just blow by that. A couple of things we did that were, one more, John, keep going, is the eject system. I know a lot of people, and you can go to the next one as well, basically a helmet removal device. We've been using that for 10 years. I know IndyCar has that now. It's one of those things we've been proactive on. And one of the problems with that is it's not an FDA-approved device, at least as far as we know. So even in the community, we try to get our EMSs to use it at local races, and their EMS director won't let him use it. So other things we need to look at is trying to get these things licensed in some way, so medically, legally, we can use them. But in our world, it works really good. You go on to the next one. That's us in action in the, as you say, we're not up there in the tower. Unfortunately, we're down there in the mud. Next, John. And then you can flip by this here with neck braces, similar like the Hans. I can get to that later. Go back, keep going to the wrist brace. Keep going. Those are some good shots. We can go back to those in a second. But one more. As the wrist braces is, here's a really good case of where I didn't expect it, but two wheels actually helped out four wheels. Is last year at Indy, when Terry was working with us, they were having a problem with the drivers having injuries in their wrist and hurting their thumbs because of feedback from the steering wheel. So we've been using these for probably 10 years now. Wrist braces similar to the knee braces you can imagine the football guys use. And so they've been hooked up, and now Terry can talk about that later, but now they're working on a prototype to help the drivers so they're not injuring their wrist with this. And it's kind of like, well, I'm glad we could add a little bit there. So we've been pretty on top of it. The problem is we don't have the money and the power to get things moving, except for this guy right here, John Moraniak. Give him a big round of applause, because this guy is our spark plug for sure. Really good guy. Without him, he wouldn't be able to merge us with you guys.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
And if you want to go back a couple more slides, just a couple that. And neck braces, we have keep going back there. Go the Liat one more with the neck braces is similar to the Hans device, and we've been trying to push these as well. Again, one of the issues is, it doesn't really work. It doesn't cause other injuries. So those are the things we have to fight with right now. And the other slide I'm not going to show you, but just shows the data. Yeah, that kind of whether it causes clavicle fractures, whether it causes increased neck fractures as opposed to decreasing. And unfortunately, we only have 4 years of solid data, but it looks very promising that it's doing its job. One more slide. And then this is an incident. If you can see the rider on top hitting the rider down below, they're both one of the top two guys. Then you go to the next slide. This is an unintended use of the neck brace we didn't think about. And if you look right below that guy's foot, where the chain is, that's his linkage of the swing arm that's going down, hitting the rider at the back of the head. and you see a little black thing just coming up towards the chain. That's the back of the neck brace, the back piece that flips up. So basically, he landed right on his neck, on the back of the neck brace, and likely saved his life if that had landed directly on his spine. So that was, he actually broke his back from his tire hitting the back of his, on the very back of his jersey there. But he's back racing, and it's amazing how they do it. Rod's in his back and everything, and he's out there winning races this year, and that was just 2 years ago. Yep. And then one more slide. And then here's an idea, unintended. Go ahead and hit the, you have to hit play on that. I don't know if you can do that on the computer. But another unintended use of the neck brace that we didn't think about. And this is just this week. Oh, go one back, but you have to hit play on the.
I don't think it's going to play.
Yeah, just click on the, just open up the whole slide. The play's down there on the slide itself. You can, but then you can open the whole screen. Just open the whole thing at the top. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, this isn't going to work. You failed us as a audiovisual guy, John. We'll have to get you a new job.
And this is exactly why I gave John that role.
Let's switch sides, Dr. D.
Yeah, unfortunately, if you watch this guy, he hits the back of the other rider. This is another top guy. He crashes, which isn't particularly the bad spot. But now, if you watch his head, if you can see the guy coming over him, the bottom left there, hits his head with the tire of the bike. Luckily, he did not get a neck injury. He says he didn't have a concussion. This was in Italy this year, so I'm not really too sure about that. So you got to get that fixed, though, John, when we get a minute, because I got a couple other really good ones they want to see.
It's actually the computer. So,
if you just double-click on the big slide itself, the biggest one there, I think it should go up.
Want this one?
Yeah, just double-click.
Wire brace?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we got a problem with the computer.
Yeah, we're technologically challenged.
Yep.
Oh, well, okay.
I know the videos weren't synced.
Anyway, but I mean, that's the thing is, we're trying to match what you guys do and get in the same vein. And luckily, between the two of us, I think we can do like two sports can merge and help each other all the time.
It won't show up there.
Dr. Trammell, how tough was it to get the IndyCar drivers to buy into additional safety gear and additional changes? Racers do not like change.
No, and that's a good starting point. When I started doing this formally, it was like 1984, and the generalized feeling amongst the drivers is don't talk to the doctor. Mm-hmm. If somebody sees you talking to the doctor, then something's wrong with you, and that we've got an advantage because now we know you're not healthy. And the evolution of that over the last 20 years plus has been go tell the doctor so he'll fix it. And the fix is not to the driver, it's to what caused the problem to the driver. And so really what happens in safety innovation in motorsports especially is it's an evolution. You don't want to have safety by revolution. If you have a problem and it injures somebody severely or kills them, you don't want to start working on the solution to that problem after the fact. You'd like to anticipate the problem and have it evolve and go away without any kind of catastrophic occurrence that makes it go away. Unfortunately, what gives money, which is the momentum that drives safety, is usually a catastrophic event. Something happens to somebody notable, and then everybody gets behind them, and big things happen. Our association with General Motors started that way. In 1992, the Speedway ended up with 9 drivers in the emergency room at the same time on that day, and several of them were very notable names with foot and ankle injuries. And as a result of that, General Motors came because one of their drivers driving actually it was an Oldsmobile, right? An Oldsmobile Intrepid in those days had a severe foot and ankle injury bilaterally, both of them. And GM came and said, well, gee, you're having this in your Indy cars. Maybe we could work with you and let's develop a program. Let's bring science to sport. And that's what John Melvin did, the late John Melvin. He really spearheaded that, came and we spent countless hours with a tape measure and a camera at the Speedway and then in the shops and so on and so forth, and came up with an injury rubric and mechanism that defined the changes made to the nose of an Indy car and subsequently to other kinds of cars that lessened the foot and ankle injuries down to almost relatively non-existent now, knock on wood. The car stays together. So that was the evolution, but it started from a catastrophic occurrence. And that's the kind of safety innovation that we're working for here. The ICMS next door is actively trying to bring about safety awareness, and the drivers now demand it. They've gone from the please don't talk to me because I don't want to be seen with you, to let's walk arm in arm because I want everybody to know I've got something new and better that makes my car safer than theirs. And we know that's not true. Everybody gets the same thing, but the buy-in has changed dramatically over the last 25 years. The drivers demand having the safest environment in their car and on the racetrack that's available.
And Jeff, over at IndyCar, you've been really involved with the cockpits and changing the way everything is in the cockpits to not only add safety, but to do it in a way that doesn't restrict the driver from what he needs to do or she needs to do inside the race car, and also is somewhat comfortable for them as well.
That's correct. That's something that Terry and I, Dr. Tremla, have done years past. We knew we had a new chassis coming in 2012. Do you remember the number of rear impact sled tests we did? I was trying to tell somebody yesterday, 150 plus. Yeah, rear impacts. At the time with the old car, we crashed backwards almost consistently at the speedway and other ovals and stuff. And so what we did to be proactive was did a lot of research on cockpit padding and stuff to prevent the injuries in preparation for this new car we got in 2012. So a lot of Dr. Trauma has a great relationship with all the drivers, and it's become a culture now, as he said, to where they come to us for questions and our expertise on how to fit better in the car, whether it's seatbelt systems or whatever. We require all our drivers to have custom-made foam seats. In addition to that, we put several pieces of padding underneath that can't be modified. That's one of our jobs in tech inspection, is to make sure they haven't done any modifications. And a quick note, you talk about people accepting. Now the culture is we're accepted 100% without question. Dating back 5, 6, 7 years ago, there were some crew chiefs and different people would wince about stuff, and some drivers. And our line as inspectors at the track, I would say to them, we're fine if you don't participate in our thing we're doing, but the next safety thing you're not going to be allowed to run it. Okay, everybody's got to participate. A lot of that revolved around our ear sensor program. There was some comfort issues initially, which we could take care of if they just let us. And so we explained to them, well, next safety thing you won't get. And the culture was changed pretty quick because they all want to keep driving and keep their careers going. So.
And it's for their interest. It's for
Correct.
stakeholders.
Correct.
So next time is
That's been the beauty of IndyCar. We've had funding for years, and I'll give Tony George credit for this. It's a culture inside our company to make our biggest asset, safer, the driver. Yep. Everything else can be replaced and stuff. The drivers, when you lose your star in Doc Bodner's world, James Stewart goes away, Ricky Carmichael went away, it's big. Danica, when she was with us, was big. Tony Kanaan, Dario Franchitti, all those, when they go away, it leaves a big hole in our fan base.
It's come a long way. I can remember there was a quote by Dr. Watkins, I believe, Terry, that the drivers refused to race. I think it was Nürburgring, because he said, if the docs are at the track, we're not racing.
That went two ways. That's probably one of the best examples of what happens. It started out when they first asked Professor Watkins to be the medical officer for Formula One. There was resistance in the drivers about having their own doc come with them because they were afraid he'd bench them. By the time a couple of years goes by, they were at Hockenheim in Germany, and the officials at Hockenheim wouldn't permit Sid Watkins on the track. The driver said he's on the track or we're not. Yep. And Bernie Ecclestone backed him up. The driver said there will be no race if there's no Sid Watkins on the track. The promoter said there'll be Sid Watkins on the track. And he was there thereafter at every event until his retirement. So the culture changed dramatically in a very short period of time.
Sure did.
And Jim, when it comes to the Hans device, I love the comment of the Hans device is called by car and driver the best invention since the seat belt, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. It really changed how many people were getting hurt in all forms of racing, but especially in stock car racing. I look at a lot of the crashes that we've had since the the device was mandatory. But how tough was it to convince people that this thing isn't uncomfortable to wear? Because racers don't like change again.
Thank you, Dennis, for that. You all have already touched on this sort of mandatory versus recommended. IndyCar was the first group that really accepted the Hans device. In '99, they started recommending and then making it mandatory. But there's a bigger question here. At this point in time, we've got well over 200,000 Hans out in the world, and that's about a third of the market. The rest of the market is not NASCAR, it's not IndyCar, it's not the pro sports car group. It's the rest of the racers. It's the circle track guys on short tracks. It's the drag racers that are still being hurt and are not accepting many of the safety devices. Not just a Hans device or a head and neck support, as we're supposed to call it these days. And the Charlotte Observer did a study that we followed up on Hans, the deaths from 2001 to 2011, and we're talking about after Dale Earnhardt, and we were still losing something like 17 or 18 drivers a year, every year, from being killed, not just being injured, and hundreds of them were hurt. And this is still going on today in the lower levels. We're talking about the IndyCar stuff here, and NASCAR. That's not where the problems are. These guys reject wearing gloves. They reject. If they show up with a less flammable top, they'll wear blue jeans at the bottom end, and it's simply amazing. I like to say in racing, good business is safe business that looks dangerous. These guys who are hurt on the weekends and killed in those kind of races, as well as lower level stuff, driver schools, hurt all of us. We really can't afford to lose competitors. We see insurance rates go up. We lose competitors. We lose some competitors, friends of competitors who attend the races, spectators who don't know anybody but love to go racing, quit going to racing. There's emotional strain on everyone when somebody gets hurt. And we then get further regulated by outside folks. And most of you probably know now that New Jersey, starting January 1, is the police in New Jersey that oversee the racetracks are making a head and neck device mandatory, and otherwise you can't race anywhere in New Jersey. And they say in that press release that a neck collar will not do. Most of us know a neck collar is a waste of time in racing, but you ought to see all the number of racers that I talk to that think a neck collar is all you need. A little soft neck collar, like go-kart racers use. So I'd like to suggest that the driver personalities will emerge, that they don't want to spend any more money or effort on safety that they could have spent on their car. We all know this. And it's true today, and it's probably true at almost any level. But these guys, in particular Terry Trammell and John Melvin and Steve Olvey, who have spearheaded the real drive in safety over the last 25 years, have convinced them they've just simply got to do it. But it doesn't reach, frankly, it doesn't reach down to the lower levels. And I suspect there are more people in this room right now that have to do with short tracks and drag racing than there are at Indy cars or NASCAR or even sports car racing. Other than I see where I'm racing these days, SCCA Club is right here with their CEO and COO represented. And it took them until last year to mandate a head and neck support. That's a bunch of pretty sophisticated guys at this kind of sports car racing. So this idea that drivers know best about safety, that you all know has been prevalent for many years, is simply not true. It's just not true. Drivers will try to get away with anything. And I can tell you, when I was 21, when I started racing, and they came out with this rule that you had to wear a long sleeve shirt that was dipped in borax and drip dried overnight to help prevent you're getting burned in a fire. I bitched about it. So now I look at people who are that age now, and you'd be surprised what they will try to get away with, as I did when I was young. So I've concluded in talking to literally thousands of drivers about trying to who are interested in a head and neck support or weren't interested in a head and neck support or a Hans device in my particular case, that you simply have to mandate it. Probably educating the drivers to a large extent is money that is not completely well spent. There's all those guys that understand it and will get it, or they're early adopters and they'll get it. But frankly, you've got to have the sanctioning bodies, the insurance companies, and the promoters get on board with this. And for any of you who are working in those areas, I hope that you will start thinking about making safety a requirement for a driver to participate in your series. And this goes for head and neck supports, better seat belts that are mounted properly. It means we're not just talking about head and neck supports here. We're talking about the whole range of safety that you need to do for our sport to survive in the long run. And that's what I have to say about it.
And Jim, you mentioned drag racing. When it comes to drag racing, Chris, on the end, your company has done such amazing stuff, because all the great devices in the world, they don't have as great of an impact unless you can measure an impact.
Right. That's what we do, is we measure it. And what we make, it's just a tool. And then you have people like Jeff at IndyCar that can take the data from us and the docs and manipulate the data or look at the data and make decisions on how to improve the safety, how to change the design of the cars. Here's a typical NHRA crash. So right in here, you can see here's the burnout, the burnout's down there, but here, the normal run here, and it had a engine failure. So and then right in here is where he hits the wall. So that section blown up, basically your main acceleration, and then engine failure, and then a deceleration, and then right in here, the car spins. We see that in the data, and then he hits the wall. Now, right in this section here, this is where he impacts the wall, and what happens is if you have crushable structure, it slows down that impact. And if this was just by chance, the way this car hit, it had a lot of crushable structure. So it's a huge impact, probably 100 plus G's. And I can't even see what it is because of But if this would have been the impact back here, it would have been much more severe accident, and that would have been a longer duration impact. And thankfully the driver on this survived and walked away from it. But it's basically luck. So guys like Jeff, they'll look at this here and they say that's good. So how do you do that in the lab? And maybe Jeff, you could speak to how you did that on that headrest. That'd probably be a good one.
Yeah, there's many examples that Dr. Trammell and I have used data for quickly, and hopefully we'll get Dr. Bodner onto this thing with Chris's box. When an IndyCar driver crashes, when you see him, whether it's in practice or on the TV during the race, once I get the car, we advertise within 5 minutes, I can get a suite of 7 graphs and a summary page to the docs. And literally from anywhere in the world. And Terry will probably tell a story about Will Power. Yeah, that's good. And so we use it at the track, and Terry would probably better explain that, for diagnosis to decide not necessarily how to treat the driver initially, but what you should look for in the future, the next day after and stuff. And then as Chris alluded, we use it constantly to develop our testing over the winter. We've got some thigh panel stuff going on right now to where we're trying to, in side impacts, we've had some tub failures, so we're trying to give some compliance to the drivers. So we've used data from street courses and the ovals to understand the G-forces they're going through, the impact levels they go through during the accidents we had that produced a couple of injuries. We've taken that to the sled and reproduced that into the laboratory, and we'll design the foam panels and stuff from that. So in our world, the crash data is the Bible, and we have it both with the car and the ear accelerometers. All of our IndyCar and Indy Lights drivers wear the ear accelerometers, so we can tell how hard their heads hit as well. And as Chris was alluding to, the headrest design, it's too bad I didn't queue up my presentation, but I gave one yesterday. We now, knock on wood, treat smaller and smaller incidences. The drivers complain about smaller and smaller impacts. This example from yesterday was literally less than a 20G impact at Baltimore last year with Scott Dixon, where he got pushed off into the wall by Will Power, and his head rattled against the headrest. And he had some discomfort for the week or so after, right? I don't know if we ever turned a concussion, but he had some discomfort. And so we took that data. It was a 10 hertz, 20G impact. Terry and I kind of laugh because we don't typically raise our eyes until above 50 Gs anymore because the drivers rattle around and they walk out. The 20G impact caused his head, so we were able to take the headrest based on the actual data from his head in the car, go to the lab, set up the crash sled to run 10 hertz at 20G impact. We did some Con4 foam and EPP foam layering, and actually reduced in that incident over 50% the head Gs that the driver will experience. Wow. We implemented that this past year, and the drivers love it. A byproduct of it was when they're on the street courses, they are so rough now, the downtown Detroit or out in Belle Isle, when we were at Baltimore, Houston and stuff, they are so rough that their heads banging off cause headaches. We've pretty much eliminated that with this Con4 layup, and it was all done based on the data that we, again, live by inside IndyCar.
Just how valuable that data is and what we can do with it. I don't know if I'm putting myself out of a job or what, but
we've always said that's the end result is we have no more work to do.
Right, but we don't want anybody else to know that. Yeah. Anyway, I was not at a racetrack. There was a road course at Sonoma, and one of the drivers T-boned another car. And while the drivers were still in the car, I get the call. I'm at home lounging, and the person that called me told me what happened. By the time I got to the computer, the videos were already up on YouTube, so I could see what had happened. And while I'm sitting there watching it, Jeff downloads the data from the car that the driver was in that was injured. I look at the data, and based on our sled testing that we'd done a ton of, I said, well, he's got a spine fracture until you prove otherwise. And I called we have a nurse liaison that's at the racetrack that goes with the driver to the hospital. I said, well, Denise, when you get to the hospital, tell the ER doc that he's going to have a thoracolumbar spine fracture, probably L2, because it's going to be down the lower part of the spine. And I'd like for them to do this study and this study so we can define it. She calls back, so the ER doctor wasn't real receptive to that says, you know, how somebody that's 2,500 miles away, hadn't seen any of this stuff, have any idea what's wrong with this driver?
I'm an ER doctor. I would say the same thing.
Yeah.
What are you trying to tell me?
So the next thing that happens is about a half hour later, the ER doc calls and goes, is there anything else you'd like for us to do? Because he had an L2 fracture. So that's how valuable this data is. And that was early on. It's evolved beyond that. We're just now starting a project that they don't know about entirely, but we're taking all of our ear accelerometer data and certainly need more of it with concussed wearers of the ear accelerometers that we hope to get from the motocross industry. So they're going to help us. We're going to take that data, crunch it, and try and come up with a threshold that says if you have an incident that generates ear accelerometer data above a certain level, you have a concussion until you prove otherwise, or until we prove otherwise. Because our biggest problem, as I'm sure is theirs as well, is the guy that walks off because he's not unconscious. And we know now that more concussions occur without loss of consciousness than the other way around. And we don't find out about it until 2 weeks later when the guy goes, you know, I had a headache for like 3 days and I couldn't see real well and I couldn't read a newspaper. It just didn't feel good. Do you think I had a concussion? It's like, well, yeah, but now you're telling me and it's 2 weeks later and it's 10 minutes before you're supposed to get in your car. So that's where we're going with this, and they're going to have lots of data to help us with, I'm sure.
Yeah, and one of the things one of the things we do in our world, and we'll do it with this, currently we have an indicator on the G-forces that the car went through, and I mentioned the 50 G point. If one of our race cars has an impact 50 Gs for more than 10 milliseconds, we turn a light on. So when Dr. Trammell and the other guys get to the car, I like to quote Mike Yates. He says, we don't treat them any different because the red light's on, but we know it was a heavy impact. Because a car won't always, if you have a heavy impact, you don't always get a lot of damage because that's what produced the heavy impact, if they hit at the right angles and stuff. When the math gets done, we'll hopefully turn one on for the head Gs as well. And then, you know, in Doc Bodner's world, you get to it. You may not treat them any different, but you got an indicator, hey, they've had a pretty hard hit here, so let's maybe do some different cues with them. So the other thing the crash box can do is help the docs on the scene with some initial triage stuff as well.
And that's great comments on the data, because if it wasn't for these EDRs, event data recorders, we wouldn't have this data. And people like Chris at development, because when we first met Terry back in '91, John Pierce, myself, the late Dr. John Melvin, Herb Fischel, they didn't exist. We literally took these out of aircraft, adapted them to racing, thanks to John Pierce and John Melvin, and now thanks to Chris, have them this size. This is a new IndyCar.
The initial crash boxes were fundamentally shipping crate instruments that measured if a shipping crate got tipped over or impacted hard during shipment, so they could understand if there was damage inside without opening up. Those were the first boxes, by ST. So
yeah, Chris.
And the new boxes, we're continually developing new products, but we've added gyroscopes to those now. Even the earpieces have gyroscopes, so that gives you the rotational aspect of the impact, so which we believe to be pretty important on head injuries.
Yeah, that's one thing that's evolved. Our current ear sensors only involve the 3-axis accelerometer in each ear, so X, Y, and Z. With Jim and Chris's help, we now have a gyro in each ear, because the size of the chips now required to measure that have gone down dramatically, that we can get them inside the ear and not have a comfort issue. So I don't think Terry knows that, but we'll have gyros in both ears for the Indy Lights guys next year. Yeah, we're doing a pilot program with all our Indy Lights guys with the new crash box and new ear sensors.
One of the great things about RTBC, we can't solve all the problems. We can't even get all the knowledge out of these guys in one appearance like this as possible. But John and I have been talking about having a committed safety segment on our Track Source radio show. So gentlemen, we're going to be bothering you quite a bit in 2015, thanks to the National Speedway Directory and our Track Source radio show, and also through John's partnership working with me. It's going to be an awesome discussion of safety, because I'm of the belief you keep talking about it long enough, people will obviously listen, and especially racers, and they'll take your advice indeed. So gentlemen, we'll be bothering you, and I encourage everybody, if you have questions for these gentlemen or anything safety related, get them to me, and we'll make that subject matter for our radio show throughout the year. A big round of applause for our safety panel.